New Orleans Saints, coming off a loss that I don't know if a lot of people were expecting them to have, hosting the Philadelphia Eagles. They now travel to Atlanta to take on the Falcons, who have played in a handful of close games already this season. Carmen, when you look at Saints Falcons and NFC South showdown, what is your matchup that matters here for this one?
It's got to be Alvin Kamara against the Atlanta run defense because Alvin Kamara I mean, he's still been on a tear. He's fourth in rushing yards, and he's 18 of his rushers have gained a first down. So you got 4 red zone rushing touchdowns too. So in particular, in the red zone, this Atlanta defense is going to need to clamp down. And Atlanta has allowed the 5th most rushing yards through week 3. So their 6th most rushing yards after contact too, I think, and that's very particular to Alvin Kamara, who gets his yards in every way, shape, and form, quite honestly. And the Falcons are also missing tackles left and right. So, and not defensive tackles, like they are just not tackling well so far this season. Clarification here. They are just it looks sloppy and it's not tightened up at all. And I guess this isn't a chance to do that again against a division opponent. But I have to think that if Kamara can kind of do what he needs to do all over the field, that the Saints are going to be just fine and they're going to start putting those numbers back up instead of what we saw last game.
Yeah, I think that they really obviously wanted Kamara to get going against the Eagles, and they just were not having that similar success. The Eagles defensive line really stepped up last week, but for as much as people want to talk about Clint Kubiak and Derek Carr, this is a team that wants to win on the ground. That is how they want to establish their offense. So you are very right to point out that Kamara and how he does versus this Atlanta run defense is going to be a really important one. That's kind of my plus factor, so I'll get to that in a second. But my matchup that matters in this one, Chris Olave versus AJ Terrell, right? I'm hoping that we get quite a bit of this because when we talk about single coverage specifically, AJ Terrell coverage stats in single coverage this season. He's played 31 of those snaps, 5 targets, 3 catches allowed, 57 yards. 2 catches have been for a first down. So it's like, okay, he's done okay. He's not been locked down in single coverage situations. On the other side of things, though, when Chris Olave is going up against single coverage against a singular corner, I guess I could also say safety, but he's not really matched up against a safety. 92.0 PFF receiving grade versus single coverage, which is the 6th highest mark amongst wide receivers. So sort of advantage Chris Olave there. You know, do we get back to that for the Saints? You talked about, okay, you normally want 4 weeks to really understand what a team is going to do on offense. And this, if Olave is able to have another really great day, if the Saints are able to get on track passing wise with all that efficiency, well, then we've got a 4-game sample size, a 3 out of 4 games, very efficient for this team. But to echo off of your point before I get your plus factor, my plus factor is Grady Jarrett. It is one of those defensive tackles for the Atlanta Falcons because I just don't know really who's getting after the passer. And what we saw the Eagles have success with against the Saints last week was Jalen Carter, right? Jalen Carter was able to manhandle Cesar Ruiz, who's on the injury report for the Saints. I don't know if he's playing for sure because his status is unknown. But anyways, if it's depending on what the interior offensive line is going to be, because Lucas Patrick moved from one guard spot to center after Eric McCoy went out, and he's going to miss some time. He's not going to be back into this one. But interior offensive line for the Falcons for the Saints, was an issue last week. Can Grady Jarrett, who is supposed to be the best pass rusher that the Falcons have on that defensive line, can he be that plus factor? Can he have the best game of his season so far? Because even though he's the best at it, Carmen, it's just an 8.3 pass rush win percentage. It's just a 64.9 pass rush grade. So it's not like he's a world beater. The rest of the team's just not great. So can he step up? That's got to be my plus factor in this one. Who is your plus factor for this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have an opportunity because my plus factor is the Saints offensive line, just given the rash of injuries they're dealing with, the amount of guys that are out of position. Eric McCoy going down. I mean, I would argue that he's probably your best offensive lineman, and he is now on injured reserve. So you're not going to have him for the foreseeable future. That does put, like you mentioned, Lucas Patrick back in at center after playing guard. And I think Chicago will remember that Lucas Patrick kind of was a better guard than he was a center. Mm-hmm. And this is one of those things where if you have you don't have continuity along the offensive line, that's going to trigger a lot of different things for your offense. The good news for the Saints, though, is Derek Carr is still very good under pressure. So if he is being pressured, he has the 2nd best passing grade while under pressure of anybody in the league, which he's probably going to need when you talk about this matchup and as the Saints go forward, given the fact that their offensive line just isn't what they wanted it to be, which is
Right.
really awful given the fact that I think they had finally figured it out. You have Trevor Penning, on the outside there doing so well, and he finally turned the corner that you wanted him to turn. This was a line that looked like, oh, they figured it out. This was like they were operating in Clint Kubiak's new offense
Right.
very, very well, opening things up both in the run game and protecting Derek Carr. It is really unfortunate that this all had to happen kind of simultaneously. And I do think that like you lose the anchor of your line in that center in Eric McCoy, and there are bound to be problems.
Yeah. You talked about how well Derek Carr's been playing under pressure. He hasn't always played well under pressure throughout his career, but confident this year, like really confident, knowing where to go with the ball when he has even been pressured. But like you mentioned, this might be his toughest test yet. He might have more pressure than he's even used to from the early parts of this season. So that's obviously what the Saints are, because it was such a strength for them in week 1 and week 2. Whatever that Saints offensive line looks like, that's going to be a telling tale and absolutely can be a plus factor here.